The blood trail glistened in the moonlight as Victoria Calloway dragged herself across the barren desert, each movement sending waves of agony through her bullet-wounded leg. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, the sound carrying across the Arizona territory as if it were singing her death song. But Victoria refused to die, not tonight, not like this, not when the silhouette of a cabin stood like a beacon of hope against the darkening horizon. The year was 1876, and the Arizona territory was as unforgiving as it was beautiful. Victoria had been traveling alone, a foolish decision in hindsight, when bandits attacked her stagecoach just outside of Oro Blanco. The driver and the other passengers had been killed instantly, but Victoria, hidden beneath the overturned carriage, had only taken a bullet to her thigh. The bandits had left her for dead, taking everything of value from the coach before riding away. For hours, Victoria had crawled across the desert floor, following the North Star, guided by the distant glimpse of chimney smoke she'd spotted before sunset. Each inch forward felt like a mile, each breath a victory against the creeping darkness that threatened to take her consciousness. When she finally reached the rough-hewn steps of the cabin, Victoria's strength abandoned her. She managed one feeble knock before collapsing against the door, her blood seeping through the threadbare fabric of her once fine traveling dress. Inside the cabin, Finn Harrington was cleaning his rifle when he heard the weak sound at his door. He set aside the weapon carefully, listening. Living alone on the outskirts of Oro Blanco made him cautious. Visitors were rare, and nighttime visitors were almost always trouble. Finn pulled back the door with his Colt revolver at the ready, only to stagger backward as a woman's limp body fell across his threshold. Blood, far too much of it, stained her dress and now his porch. "Dear God," he muttered, holstering his pistol and kneeling beside her. Tentatively, he pressed his fingers to her neck, relief flooding through him at the faint but steady pulse beneath her skin. Without hesitation, Finn slid his arms beneath the woman's unconscious form and lifted her inside. She was light, too light, as if the hardships of frontier life had whittled her down to sinew and determination. Her face, though smudged with dirt and drawn with pain, was striking, with high cheekbones and a delicate jaw that spoke of Eastern refinement. "Hold on," he whispered as he laid her gently on his bed. "Just hold on." Finn worked quickly, gathering clean cloths, his medical supplies, remnants from his time as a field medic during the war, and a basin of water. The bullet had gone clean through her thigh, missing the bone by a miracle. But infection was setting in and the blood loss was severe. Victoria's eyes fluttered open as Finn cleaned the wound, her gaze unfocused and glassy with fever. "Am I dead?" she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "Not yet," Finn replied, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "And I aim to keep it that way." She tried to smile, but pain twisted it into a grimace. "I'm Victoria Calloway." "Finn Harrington," he offered, hands steady as he worked. "Rest now, Miss Calloway. You're safe here." "The stagecoach," she murmured, fighting to stay conscious. "They killed everyone." Finn's jaw tightened. "Bandits," she nodded weakly. "4 men, masks, one had a scar." Her voice trailed off as exhaustion claimed her again. Finn worked through the night, cleaning and bandaging her wound, coaxing water and broth between her parched lips whenever she surfaced from unconsciousness. He changed the cloths on her forehead as fever burned through her, bathing her face and arms with cool water to bring down the dangerous heat radiating from her skin. As the night deepened, Finn positioned his rocking chair beside the bed and settled in for his vigil. Outside, the desert wind keened around the corners of his cabin, a mournful sound that matched his mood. He was a man accustomed to solitude, had chosen it deliberately after the war, but something about this woman's desperate arrival stirred feelings he'd thought long buried. Victoria slipped in and out of consciousness throughout the night. Sometimes she spoke clearly, asking for water or thanking him in a voice educated and refined. Other times she mumbled incoherently, calling names Finn didn't recognize, pleading with unseen figures. During one fevered bout, she grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't leave," she begged, eyes wide but unseeing. "I'm not going anywhere," Finn promised and meant it. By dawn, the worst seemed to have passed. Victoria's fever broke just as the first golden light spilled through the cabin's single window. Her breathing eased, her sleep deepening from the restless thrashing of fever to the healing quiet of normal slumber. Finn moved stiffly from his chair, muscles protesting after hours of vigilance. He stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil, pausing every few minutes to glance at his unexpected guest. With the immediate danger past, he allowed himself to truly look at her. Victoria Calloway was beautiful, even in her current state. Auburn hair, now tangled and dust-streaked, framed a face that might have graced the parlors of Boston or New York. Her hands, though roughened somewhat by what must have been recent work, still bore the slender elegance of a lady. What was she doing traveling alone through the Arizona territory? As the morning progressed, Finn tended to his animals, 2 horses, and a small flock of chickens, always keeping the door open to hear if Victoria called. He prepared a simple breakfast, hoping she might wake enough to eat something substantial. It was nearly noon when Victoria's eyes opened fully, clear of fever's haze for the first time. She struggled to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her injured leg. "Easy now," Finn said, hurrying to her side. "That leg needs time to heal." Victoria blinked at him, taking in his appearance tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea. A faint scar ran along his jaw, disappearing into the short beard that covered his face. "Mr. Harrington," she said, recognition dawning, "you saved my life." He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. "Not in my experience," she replied quietly, then looked around the cabin. It was small but meticulously kept, a single room with a stove, table, 2 chairs, and the bed where she lay. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books, more books than she'd expect to find in a frontier cabin. "How long have I been here?" "Just the night," Finn answered, pouring her a cup of water. "You lost a fair amount of blood, but the bullet went clean through. You were lucky." Victoria accepted the water gratefully. "I don't remember much after reaching your door. You knocked once and collapsed. I thought you might be." He stopped himself. "Well, you're going to be fine now. The others on the stagecoach weren't so fortunate," Victoria said, her voice hollow. "The driver, Mr. Pembroke, and a young couple traveling to California. They shot them without warning or mercy." "I'm sorry," Finn said simply, knowing from experience that no words could adequately comfort someone who had witnessed such violence. Victoria nodded, then tried to move again, this time more carefully. "I should not impose on you further. If you could help me to Oro Blanco, you're not going anywhere for at least a few days," Finn interrupted firmly. "That leg needs time to heal, and you're still weak from blood loss." She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, practicality winning over pride. "You're right, of course. I've already been enough trouble." "No trouble," Finn assured her, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. A single man housing an unmarried woman, even under these circumstances, would raise eyebrows if discovered. "Rest now. I'll fix you something to eat." Over the next few days, Victoria regained strength slowly. Finn proved to be an attentive caretaker, changing her bandages with competent, clinical hands, and providing simple but nourishing meals. He fashioned a crutch from a forked branch so she could move around the cabin when he was outside tending to his small ranch, and brought her books from his collection when she grew restless. They fell into an easy rhythm, surprising in its comfort. During the evenings, they talked. Victoria learned that Finn had come west after fighting for the Union in the Civil War, seeking solitude and peace after witnessing too much death. He'd purchased this small parcel of land outside Oro Blanco 3 years ago and made a modest living raising horses and occasionally guiding travelers through the territory. In turn, Victoria shared parts of her own story. She had come from Philadelphia, where she'd worked as a schoolteacher until circumstances forced her west. What circumstances? Finn asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Victoria in the rocking chair, her injured leg propped on a stool. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the worn binding of the book in her lap. "My father died last winter, leaving substantial debts. Our home, my mother's jewelry, even my teaching position all gone within months." "I'm sorry," Finn said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "My aunt lives in San Francisco," Victoria continued. "She offered me a place to stay until I could find work. The stagecoach was to take me to Tucson, where I would connect with the train west." "And now?" Finn asked, watching as firelight played across her features. Victoria looked down at her bandaged leg, then back up at him, a rueful smile touching her lips. "Now I'm at the mercy of your kindness until I can walk properly again." "You're welcome here as long as you need," Finn said, surprised by how much he meant it. The next day, Finn rode into Oro Blanco for supplies and to check if there was any news about the stagecoach attack. The small frontier town consisted of a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, saloon, small hotel, sheriff's office, and a handful of other businesses catering to the needs of the surrounding ranches and passing travelers. Sheriff James Thornton was outside his office when Finn rode in, sweeping dust from the boardwalk in a losing battle against the desert wind. "Harrington," the sheriff greeted with a nod. "Unusual to see you in town twice in 1 month." Finn dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Heard anything about a stagecoach robbery? Would have been 4 days ago on the southern route." Thornton's expression darkened. "Sure have. Found the coach yesterday, driver and 3 passengers dead, all valuables taken." "You know something about it?" Finn hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Victoria was safe at his cabin, but he wasn't sure how she'd feel about him discussing her situation. "Just rumors," he said finally. "Any idea who did it?" "Working on it," Thornton replied, though his tone suggested limited confidence. "Probably the same gang that's been hitting coaches between here and Tucson. Led by that bastard Reeves, I reckon." Nathan Reeves. The name sent a chill through Finn. The outlaw had been terrorizing the territory for months, known for his brutality and the distinctive scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. "You get any leads, you let me know," the sheriff continued. "Those animals need to swing." Finn nodded, then moved on to the general store. As he gathered supplies, extra coffee, sugar, flour, and medical supplies to replace what he'd used on Victoria, he considered the implications of Reeves being involved. If Victoria had seen his face, had recognized him despite his mask because of that scar. Martha Wilson, the storekeeper's wife, interrupted his thoughts. "Buying quite a bit today, Mr. Harrington. Expecting company." Finn kept his expression neutral. "Just stocking up. Winter will be here before we know it." "It's only September," Martha replied with a knowing smile. She was a notorious gossip, and Finn had no intention of feeding her curiosity. "I like to be prepared," he said. paying for his purchases and loading them into his saddlebags. On the ride back to his cabin, Finn kept alert, scanning the horizon and rocky outcroppings that dotted the landscape. If Reeves learned there was a survivor who could identify him, he'd come looking to silence her. The thought of Victoria in danger made Finn's chest tighten in a way that surprised him. When he arrived home, he found Victoria sitting outside on the small porch, her injured legs stretched out before her, a book open in her lap. The sight of her alive, safe, waiting for him sent an unexpected surge of warmth through him. "You shouldn't be outside," he said, dismounting and tying his horse to the post. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I've been inside for days. The fresh air is wonderful and I was careful." Finn wanted to argue but found himself smiling instead. Her color was better, and the stubborn tilt of her chin reminded him that she was a woman accustomed to making her own decisions. "Any news from town?" she asked as he carried his supplies inside. Finn set the bags on the table before answering. "They found the stagecoach. I'm sorry, Victoria." "There were no survivors besides you." She nodded, her eyes growing distant. "I feared as much, did they? Were the bodies?" "They've been properly laid to rest in Oro Blanco," Finn assured her. He hesitated before continuing. "The sheriff thinks it might have been Nathan Reeves' gang." Victoria's head snapped up. "The man with the scar, you saw it?" Finn asked, kneeling beside her chair. "When he pulled me from the coach," she confirmed, her voice steady despite the painful memory. His mask slipped for a moment. The scar was distinctive, like a lightning bolt from his eye to his jaw. Finn's jaw tightened. "If Reeves learns you survived, that you can identify him, he'll come for me," Victoria finished, her hands clutching the book so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I've put you in danger by being here." "No," Finn said firmly. "You're not responsible for Reeves or his actions, but we need to be careful. I didn't tell the sheriff about you, not yet. I wasn't sure if you'd want that." Victoria considered this. "Thank you, I need time to think about what to do next." That night, as they ate supper, Victoria watched Finn across the table. In just a few days, this stranger had become her protector, her caretaker, perhaps even her friend. There was a quiet strength to him, a gentleness that belied his rugged appearance. "Tell me about your life before the war," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Finn looked up, surprise flashing across his features. "Not much to tell. Grew up in Ohio. My father was a blacksmith. I helped in his shop until I enlisted." "And after the war? Why come all the way out here?" He was quiet for so long Victoria thought he might not answer. Finally, he set down his fork. "I was a field medic, saw too much death, too much suffering. When it was over, I couldn't go back to my old life. Everything seemed small, trivial." "So you came west to forget?" Victoria asked softly. "To remember who I was," Finn corrected. "Or to find out who I could be away from all that death." He smiled ruefully. "Ironic that I ended up in a place just as violent in its way." "But beautiful too," Victoria said, thinking of the vast desert landscape, the mountains painted purple and gold at sunset, the star-filled skies that seemed to go on forever. "Yes," Finn agreed, his eyes meeting hers. "Beautiful too." The next day brought a change in the weather. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, unusual for September in the territory. By mid-afternoon, rain lashed against the cabin, turning the dusty yard to mud within minutes. Victoria stood at the window, watching the downpour with fascination. "I've never seen rain like this in the desert." "It doesn't happen often," Finn explained, coming to stand beside her. "But when it does, it's fierce. The arroyos will flood quickly. We'll be staying put until it passes." Victoria was acutely aware of his presence beside her, of the warmth radiating from his body in the suddenly cool cabin. For days, He had tended her wound with clinical detachment, but now, standing together watching the rain, she felt a different kind of tension between them. "I should check on the horses," Finn said abruptly, moving away from the window. "Make sure they're sheltered properly." Victoria watched him don his slicker and hat before stepping out into the deluge. Through the window, she could see him struggling against the wind as he made his way to the small stable. She moved carefully back to the chair, her legs still painful but improving daily. Soon she would be well enough to travel again, to continue on to San Francisco as she'd planned. The thought brought less comfort than it should have. Outside, Finn secured the stable doors against the driving rain, making sure his horses had fresh water and feed. The storm had arrived suddenly, with a violence that matched his turbulent thoughts. Victoria Calloway had come into his life like a hurricane herself, upending the solitude he'd cultivated since coming west. He'd grown accustomed to her presence in his small cabin, her quiet laugh, the thoughtful questions she asked about his books, the way sunlight caught in her auburn hair. The idea of her leaving left an emptiness he hadn't anticipated, but what could he offer her? A hard life on a small ranch in the Arizona territory, always watching the horizon for trouble. Victoria was educated, refined. She belonged in civilization, not the brutal frontier. By the time Finn returned to the cabin, soaked despite his slicker, night had begun to fall. Victoria had stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil, moving around his kitchen with an ease that spoke of their growing comfort with each other. "You're drenched," she observed, taking his wet hat and hanging it by the door. "You should change before you catch your death." Finn nodded, grateful for her practical concern. He changed behind the privacy screen in the corner, emerging in dry clothes to find Victoria holding out a steaming cup of coffee. "Thank you," he said, their fingers brushing as he took the cup. A jolt of awareness passed between them, neither acknowledging it aloud. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled around the cabin, finding every crack and crevice, making the fire dance and flicker. Thunder rolled across the desert, and lightning illuminated the night in brilliant flashes. "Will the cabin withstand this?" Victoria asked, trying to keep her voice light despite her concern. "It's weathered worse," Finn assured her, though in truth, he'd never seen a storm quite this ferocious in his 3 years on this land. As if in answer to his thoughts, a tremendous crack split the night, followed by a crash that shook the entire cabin. Victoria gasped, instinctively reaching for Finn's arm. "Lightning strike," he said, already moving toward the door. "Close." Outside, through the curtain of rain, Finn could see one of the old cottonwood trees that stood near the corral had been split by lightning, half of it now lying across his fence. The horses whinnied in distress within the stable. "I need to check the damage," he called to Victoria, who stood in the doorway. "Stay inside." "Be careful," she urged, her face pale with worry. Finn battled his way through the storm to the fallen tree. The fence was damaged but still standing in most places. The horses were frightened but unharmed. He worked quickly to secure what he could, knowing a proper repair would have to wait until morning. When he returned to the cabin, Victoria had moved their bedding away from the window, concerned about leaks or broken glass if the storm worsened. "Smart thinking," Finn acknowledged, dripping onto the floor again. Victoria handed him a towel. "You're going to flood the place yourself if you don't dry off." Despite the storm, despite the danger that might still be searching for her, Victoria felt an unexpected contentment in this moment, this simple domestic exchange in a cabin far from everything she'd known. Later, as they sat before the fire, the storm still raging outside, Victoria found herself studying Finn's profile. The strong jaw beneath his short beard, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into desert suns, the capable hands that had saved her life, tended her wound, and now turned the pages of his book with surprising gentleness. "You're staring," Finn observed without looking up. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking." "About how strange life can be," she answered honestly. "A week ago I was on a stagecoach heading west, certain of my path. Now I'm here and everything has changed." Finn closed his book, finally meeting her gaze. "Do you regret it? Coming west?" "No," Victoria said after a moment's consideration. "Despite everything, no. There was nothing left for me in Philadelphia but memories and debts. And your aunt in San Francisco?" "My mother's sister," Victoria explained. "Kind enough to offer shelter, but we've never been close. It was more obligation than affection that prompted her invitation." Finn nodded, understanding. Family obligation was something he knew well. "What will you do there?" "Teach if I can find a position," Victoria said. "Or work as a shop girl, a seamstress, whatever honest work is available." "You'd be an excellent teacher," Finn said with conviction. "Patient, observant," Victoria smiled at the compliment. "And how would you know that, Mr. Harrington?" "I've watched you with my books," he replied. "The way you handle them, the questions you ask. You have a natural curiosity and care." The storm chose that moment to unleash another barrage of thunder, so close it seemed to shake the very foundation of the cabin. Victoria startled, her hand flying to her throat. "It's just the storm," Finn reassured her. "It will pass by morning." "I know," Victoria said, embarrassed by her reaction. "I'm not usually so jumpy, it's just, since the attack." Finn moved to sit beside her on the small sofa. "You've been through a terrible ordeal. Anyone would be affected." "I keep seeing their faces," she admitted quietly. "The young couple. They were just starting their life together. And Mr. Pembroke, the driver, he told me at our last stop that he was retiring after this run. Going home to his grandchildren in California." Tears welled in her eyes, and Finn hesitated only a moment before putting his arm around her shoulders. Victoria leaned into his strength, allowing herself to draw comfort from his presence. "I should have died with them," she whispered. "No," Finn said firmly. "Your survival doesn't dishonor their deaths, Victoria. You living, continuing on, that gives meaning to what happened." She looked up at him, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "How do you know exactly what to say?" "I don't," Finn admitted. "I just know what I needed to hear after the war, when I was the one who survived when so many didn't." Victoria nodded, understanding. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against the scar on his jaw. "Thank you, Finn, for everything." In that moment, with the storm raging around them and shadows dancing across the walls of the small cabin, something shifted between them. Finn's eyes darkened, dropping briefly to her lips before he pulled away, standing abruptly. "You should rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Your leg needs time to heal properly." Victoria felt the loss of his warmth immediately, confusion and a hint of hurt crossing her features. "Of course, you're right." That night, as the storm gradually weakened to a steady rain, neither slept well. Victoria on the bed, Finn on his pallet near the fire, both acutely aware of the other's presence just feet away. Morning brought clear skies and the fresh, clean scent of desert after rain. Finn was already outside assessing the damage when Victoria emerged from the cabin, moving more easily with the crutch he'd made her. "It could have been worse," Finn called to her, gesturing to the fallen tree and damaged fence. "Nothing that can't be fixed." Victoria made her way carefully across the still muddy yard, her skirts held up with one hand. "Can I help?" Finn looked like he might refuse, then reconsidered. "Actually, yes. If you could hold these posts straight while I secure them, it would make the job faster." They worked together through the morning, Victoria providing an extra pair of hands where needed, Finn explaining what he was doing as they went. The physical labor was satisfying, and Victoria found herself enjoying the simple, productive task. By midday, the fence was repaired, and Finn had cut enough of the fallen tree into manageable pieces to clear the corral. They sat in the shade of the porch, drinking cool water and watching as a hawk circled lazily overhead. "You're good at this," Finn observed. "Ranch work." Victoria laughed. "Hardly. I'm merely following instructions." "Better than most city folk would," he insisted. "You adapt quickly." It was a compliment that warmed her more than it should have. "My father always said I was stubborn that way, once I set my mind to something." "What would you set your mind to if you could choose anything?" Finn asked, genuinely curious. Victoria considered the question seriously. "A year ago, I would have said continuing my teaching, perhaps opening my own small school someday." She paused, looking out at the vast landscape stretching before them. "Now, I'm not certain. The world seems both larger and smaller than before." "How so, larger in its possibilities?" she explained. "Coming west, seeing all this." She gestured to the mountains in the distance, the desert blooming with unexpected life after the rain. "But smaller, too, in how quickly life can change, how fragile our plans can be." Finn nodded, understanding perfectly. "The war taught me the same lesson. We think we control our destinies, but often it's chance that decides." "Or providence," Victoria suggested. "Is that what brought you to my door?" Finn asked, his voice low. "Providence?" Their eyes met, the question hanging between them laden with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Before Victoria could answer, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Finn was on his feet instantly, hand going to the pistol at his hip. "Get inside," he ordered, his entire demeanor changing from relaxed companion to vigilant protector. "Now." Victoria didn't argue, moving as quickly as her injured leg allowed. From inside the cabin, she watched through the window as 3 riders approached 2 men and a woman, all dressed for travel, their horses laden with packs. Finn stood his ground as they neared, his posture relaxed but alert. Victoria couldn't hear the conversation, but after a few minutes, Finn's stance eased. He gestured toward the cabin and the riders dismounted. When Finn opened the door, he was smiling slightly. "Victoria, these folks were caught in the storm yesterday. Their wagon broke an axle about 2 miles back. They're heading to Tucson." The travelers William and Sarah Peterson and Sarah's brother Thomas Grant were grateful for the offer of coffee and a place to rest before continuing their journey on horseback, leaving their disabled wagon behind. "We're hoping to find a blacksmith in Oro Blanco who can help us retrieve it," William explained as they sat around Finn's table. "All our worldly possessions are in that wagon." "I know the smithy there," Finn offered. "Ben Sullivan's a good man, fair prices. Tell him I sent you." Sarah, a kindly woman in her 30s, had noticed Victoria's injury and the way she favored her leg. "What happened to you, dear? That looks painful." Victoria exchanged a quick glance with Finn, unsure how much to reveal. "An accident on the road," she said finally. "Mr. Harrington has been kind enough to help me recover. Are you too?" Sarah glanced between them, the question clear in her eyes. "Neighbors," Finn supplied quickly, though the slight flush on his neck belied his casual tone. "Miss Calloway was traveling to San Francisco when she was injured." The conversation moved on to safer topics: the unusual storm, conditions of the trail ahead, news from the east that the travelers brought. But Victoria was distracted by Finn's swift denial of any connection between them. "Of course, It was the proper response, the expected one. Yet it stung in a way that surprised her. After the travelers departed, promising to send word from town if they learned anything about the stagecoach attack, an awkward silence fell between Finn and Victoria. "I should check your wound," Finn said finally, businesslike and distant. "Make sure it's healing properly." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed as Finn knelt before her, carefully unwrapping the bandage around her thigh. His touch was impersonal, clinical, but Victoria was intensely aware of his proximity, of the strength in his hands as they worked with such gentleness. "The infection is gone," he noted, examining the wound, "and it's closing nicely. You're healing well." "Thanks to your care," Victoria said softly. Finn's hand stilled for a moment before he continued rebandaging the wound. "You would have survived regardless. You're stronger than you look." "Is that a compliment, Mr. Harrington?" Victoria asked, trying to lighten the sudden tension between them. "An observation," Finn replied, though a hint of a smile softened his features. "You crawled for miles with a bullet in your leg. That takes more than just luck." Once her leg was bandaged, Finn stood, putting careful distance between them. "You should be able to travel within a week if you're careful. So eager to be rid of me." The question escaped before Victoria could stop it, hanging in the air between them. Finn's expression tightened. "No." "But you have plans, a life waiting in San Francisco." "A life I never chose," Victoria replied quietly. "An obligation, nothing more." "What are you saying?" Finn asked, his voice rough with emotion he'd been trying to suppress. Victoria stood, testing her weight on her injured leg, finding it stronger than before. "I'm saying that plans can change, that perhaps Providence brought me to your door for a reason beyond mere survival." Finn shook his head, backing away slightly. "Victoria, you don't know what you're saying. You've been through a trauma. Your feelings don't tell me what I feel," Victoria interrupted, a flash of anger giving her courage. "I may be injured, but I'm not a child or a fool. I know my own mind." "Do you?" Finn challenged. "A week ago you were headed to San Francisco with your future mapped out. Now you're talking about, what, staying here in this cabin, this life. Would that be so terrible?" Victoria asked, vulnerable despite her determination. Finn's expression softened. "No, God help me, no. But I can't let you make that choice now, like this. When you're healed, when you've had time to think clearly." "Finn Harrington," Victoria said, taking a step toward him. "I have never thought more clearly in my life." Before he could respond, the sound of galloping horses once again interrupted them. This time, the approaching riders were not friendly travelers. Finn moved to the window, his body tensing as he looked out. 4 riders, armed. He turned to Victoria, his expression grim. "It's Reeves." Fear shot through Victoria, but she forced it down. "How do you know?" "The scar, just as you described it." Finn moved quickly, grabbing his rifle from above the fireplace. "Get in the root cellar now." "I won't hide while you face them alone," Victoria protested. "Victoria." Finn gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. "Please, I can't fight them and worry about you at the same time." Something in his voice, the raw emotion, the plea, convinced her. Victoria nodded once, then impulsively leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a brief, desperate kiss. "Be careful," she whispered against his mouth before pulling away and moving toward the trapdoor that led to the small cellar beneath the cabin. Finn stood frozen for a moment, touched by her courage and the unexpected kiss. Then he shook himself back to attention, checked his weapons, and moved to face the approaching danger. Victoria huddled in the darkness of the root cellar, listening to the muffled sounds above. She could make out voices, Finn's steady and calm, another man's higher and more nasal, but couldn't distinguish the words. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared they might hear it through the floorboards. Above, Finn stood on his porch, rifle held casually but ready. Nathan Reeves and his 3 companions had stopped a respectful distance from the cabin, their hands hovering near their weapons. "Afternoon," Reeves called, his scarred face twisting into what might have been meant as a friendly smile. "Hope we're not intruding. What can I do for you gentlemen?" Finn asked, keeping his tone neutral. Reeves dismounted, his men remaining on their horses. "Looking for someone. A woman. Heard she might have come this way after a misunderstanding down south." "Misunderstanding," Finn repeated, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Stagecoach affair," Reeves said dismissively. "Unfortunate business, but this woman, she took something that doesn't belong to her. We aim to get it back." "Haven't seen any woman," Finn lied smoothly. "Been here alone since spring." Reeves studied him, clearly skeptical. "Mind if we take a look around? Won't take but a minute." "I do mind," Finn replied, his voice hardening. "This is private property." One of Reeves' men, a burly figure with a pockmarked face, spat on the ground. "He's lying, Nathan. Them travelers in town said they saw a woman here just today." Reeves' eyes narrowed. "That's so. Now why would you lie to me, friend?" "Not your friend," Finn said evenly. "And I'm asking you politely to leave my property." "Or what?" Reeves challenged, his hand moving to his pistol. "Or I'll be forced to defend my home," Finn answered, raising his rifle slightly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Reeves laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "4 against 1. Bad odds, mister." "For you," Finn agreed calmly. "Because I only need to hit one of you specifically before your men gun me down." "Are you willing to die today, Reeves?" The outlaw's scarred face contorted with rage, but caution won out. "We'll be back," he promised. "With more men. You think about whether one woman is worth dying for." "Already have," Finn replied. Reeves and his men backed away slowly, turning their horses only when they were well out of rifle range. Finn watched until they disappeared over the ridge before lowering his weapon and returning inside. Victoria emerged from the root cellar, pale but composed. "They'll come back." "Yes," Finn agreed, checking his ammunition supply. "But not today. They'll regroup. Plan. We have a little time." "Time for what?" Victoria asked. "Finn, you can't fight them all. This isn't your battle." "It became my battle the moment you crawled to my door," Finn said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We need to get you to safety." "Oro Blanco. The sheriff. Thornton's a good man, but he has 2 deputies and a town to protect. We need something more secure." Finn was already packing supplies into a saddlebag. "There's a military outpost about 30 miles north. Captain Miller is an old war friend. He'll help us." "Us," Victoria repeated. "Finn, I won't let you append your life for me." "You have a home here, a ranch, none of which matters if you're not safe," Finn interrupted, then stopped, seeming surprised by his own vehemence. More gently he added, "Victoria, I lost everything once already in the war. I rebuilt. I can do it again if necessary." The simple declaration stunned her into silence. For a man like Finn, who chose his words carefully, it was tantamount to a confession. "We'll leave at nightfall," he decided, returning to his preparations. "Travel is harder, but so is tracking. With luck, we'll reach the outpost by morning." As darkness fell, they readied themselves for the journey. Finn helped Victoria onto his most reliable horse, a steady gelding named Thunder, before mounting his second horse, a younger mare he called Whisper. "Stay close," he instructed as they set out, the night sky ablaze with stars. "If there's trouble, you ride hard for the north. Don't stop, don't look back." Victoria nodded, though she silently resolved that she would not leave him to face danger alone again. They rode through the night, Finn leading them on a circuitous route that followed dry creek beds and rocky outcroppings where their tracks would be harder to follow. Victoria's leg throbbed with pain, but she gritted her teeth against it, refusing to slow their pace. Dawn found them in the foothills of a small mountain range, the landscape changing from desert scrub to pine forest as they climbed higher. Finn called a brief halt, checking Victoria's wound and offering water and jerky from his supplies. "How much farther?" Victoria asked, wincing as she stretched her stiff leg. "Another few hours," Finn estimated, scanning the horizon behind them for signs of pursuit. "How's the leg?" "Manageable," Victoria assured him, though in truth, the pain was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Finn studied her face, seeing the strain she tried to hide. "We'll rest a bit longer. The horses need it too." They found a small clearing sheltered by pines, dismounting carefully. Finn helped Victoria to a fallen log where she could sit comfortably, then tended to the horses, loosening their girths and allowing them to graze on the sparse mountain grass. "It's beautiful here," Victoria observed, looking up at the towering pines swaying gently in the morning breeze. "So different from the desert below." "Arizona is full of surprises," Finn agreed, settling beside her. "Desert, forest, mountains, sometimes all within a day's ride." Victoria leaned against him slightly, fatigue making her bold. "Like its people." Finn smiled, cautiously putting his arm around her shoulders. "Are you saying I'm full of surprises, Miss Calloway?" "The most surprising man I've ever met," she confirmed, turning to look at him. "A frontiersman with a library, a solitary rancher who takes in strays. A man who would risk everything for a woman he barely knows." "I know enough," Finn said softly. "I know you're brave and stubborn and stronger than you have any right to be after what you've been through." Victoria's heart raced at the warmth in his voice, at the way his eyes lingered on her face. "And I know you're honorable and kind and far too willing to sacrifice your own happiness for others." Finn's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as if she might break. "Victoria." The crack of a rifle shot shattered the moment, sending birds scattering from the trees above them. Finn reacted instantly, pulling Victoria to the ground and covering her body with his as a second shot splintered the log where they had been sitting. "Reeves," Finn growled, reaching for his rifle. "They must have followed our trail despite the precautions." "How many?" Victoria whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Can't tell yet," Finn replied, peering cautiously around their meager cover. "At least two based on the shots." A voice called from the trees above them. "We know you're there, Harrington. Send out the woman and you might live through this." "Not going to happen, Reeves," Finn shouted back, his eyes scanning the forest for movement. "Your choice," Reeves called. "But she's not worth dying for. Whatever she's offering you, I can double it." Finn's jaw tightened with anger. "Stay low," he instructed Victoria. "When I start firing, crawl to the horses. Get on Whisper, she's faster. Ride north. Don't stop until you reach the outpost." "I'm not leaving you," Victoria insisted. "Yes, you are," Finn said firmly. "Because if you don't, they'll kill us both. This way, one of us has a chance." Victoria wanted to argue, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she reached for his hand, squeezing it once. "Come back to me." Finn nodded, then positioned himself behind the fallen log. "Ready?" Victoria took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Ready." Finn fired 3 rapid shots in the direction of the last voice, then 2 more at a flicker of movement to their right. Immediately, return fire peppered their position, wood chips flying as bullets struck the log. Victoria began crawling toward the horses, staying as low as possible, using the uneven ground for cover. Her injured legs screamed in protest, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Behind her, Finn kept up a steady barrage, forcing their attackers to keep their heads down. She had almost reached the horses when a man stepped from behind a tree directly in her path. Pockmarked face, yellow teeth bared in a triumphant grin, one of Reeves' men. "Going somewhere, miss," he sneered, leveling his pistol at her. Victoria froze, terror locking her muscles. From behind her, she heard Finn shout her name, the desperation in his voice cutting through her fear. Without thinking, Victoria grabbed a handful of dirt and flung it into her attacker's face. He cursed, momentarily blinded, his shot going wild. Victoria scrambled to her feet, ignoring the searing pain in her leg, and launched herself at him with all her strength. They crashed to the ground together, Victoria clawing and struggling with a ferocity born of desperation. The outlaw was stronger, but surprise was on her side. She managed to knock his pistol away, but he recovered quickly, pinning her beneath him. "Feisty one, aren't you?" he growled, his breath hot against her face. A shot rang out, and the man's eyes widened in surprise. A dark stain spread across his chest as he toppled sideways, revealing Finn standing several yards away, his smoking rifle still aimed. "Victoria!" Finn rushed to her side, helping her up. "Are you hurt?" "No," she gasped, shaking with reaction. But there are more, as if summoned by her words, more gunfire erupted from the trees. Finn pushed Victoria toward the horses, returning fire over his shoulder. They reached the animals, which were nervously stamping and pulling at their tethers. Finn boosted Victoria onto Whisper's back, then turned to face their attackers, providing cover as she gathered the reins. "Go," he ordered, slapping the horse's rump. Victoria hesitated, torn between safety and leaving Finn behind. In that moment of indecision, she saw movement in the trees above him, Reeves taking aim. "Finn, look out!" she screamed. Finn spun, firing upward even as Reeves squeezed his trigger. Both men fell, Reeves tumbling from the tree branch where he'd been perched, Finn dropping to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Victoria was off her horse in an instant, rushing to Finn's side despite his shouts for her to flee. Blood seeped between his fingers where he pressed them to his wound. "It's not bad," he grunted, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Grazing shot." "Liar," Victoria accused, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound. "Can you ride?" Finn nodded grimly. "Have to. There's at least one more of them out there." As if to confirm his assessment, a bullet whined past them, embedding itself in a nearby tree. They ducked instinctively. "On three," Finn said, his voice tight with pain. "We make for the horses together." Victoria nodded, helping him to his feet. 1, 2, 3. They ran in a half-crouch toward the horses, Victoria supporting Finn as best she could despite her own injury. More shots followed them, but the remaining outlaws' aim was poor, the bullets going wide. They mounted hastily, Finn swaying slightly in the saddle before gaining his balance. Without a word, they spurred their horses forward, leaving the clearing behind and plunging deeper into the forest. For what seemed like hours, they rode hard, following game trails and pushing through undergrowth when necessary. Victoria kept close to Finn, watching anxiously as the bloodstain on his makeshift bandage grew larger. Finally, when the horses began to tire and Finn's face had taken on an alarming grayish tinge, they stopped in a small ravine where a stream provided water and thick willows offered concealment. "Let me see," Victoria insisted, helping Finn dismount and settle against a boulder. She carefully peeled back the blood-soaked cloth, wincing at the angry wound beneath. "The bullet's still in there," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It needs to come out." Finn nodded weakly. "Saddlebag. Medical kit." Victoria found the small leather pouch containing basic surgical supplies, forceps, needle and thread, bandages, and a flask of whiskey that Finn had packed for just such an emergency. "I've never done this before," she admitted, fear tightening her throat. "Steadier hands." "Than most," Finn managed, offering a ghost of a smile. "You can do it." Victoria took a deep breath, steeling herself. She cleaned the wound as best she could with water from the stream, then poured whiskey over both the injury and the forceps. Finn hissed in pain but remained still. "I'm sorry," she whispered as she probed for the bullet, tears blurring her vision. "I'm so sorry." Finn's jaw was clenched tight, sweat beading on his forehead, but he didn't cry out. When Victoria finally extracted the bullet, a small, misshapen lump of lead, he exhaled sharply, his body sagging with relief. "Well done," he murmured as she stitched the wound closed and bound it with fresh bandages. "Knew you could. Do it." Victoria wiped her blood-stained hands on her skirt, trembling with the aftermath of fear and concentration. "We need to get you to the outpost. You've lost too much blood." "Rest first," Finn insisted. "Just a little while." Despite her concern, Victoria knew he was right. They were both exhausted, and forcing the horses to continue without rest would only slow them down in the long run. She settled beside him, arranging his coat as a pillow behind his head. "Sleep," she urged. "I'll keep watch." Finn's eyes were already closing, but his hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "Victoria, I'm here," she assured him. "I'm not going anywhere." As Finn slept, Victoria kept vigilant guard, her father's small derringer the one possession the bandits hadn't taken from the stagecoach clutched in her hand. Every sound made her tense: the rustle of leaves, the call of birds, the occasional snap of a twig as forest creatures moved about their business. The afternoon waned, shadows lengthening as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. Victoria checked Finn's wound periodically, relieved to find the bleeding had slowed and there was no immediate sign of infection. When he finally stirred, his eyes seemed clearer. Some color returned to his face. "How long?" he asked. "A few hours," Victoria replied, offering him water. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," Finn said dryly, attempting to sit up straighter and wincing at the movement. "But I'll live thanks to you." Victoria smiled, relief washing through her. "We should reach the outpost before dark if we leave now." Finn nodded, accepting her help to stand. "Did you see what happened to Reeves? He fell when you shot him," Victoria recalled. "I don't know if he's dead or just wounded." "We can't assume he's out of the picture," Finn said grimly. "And there's still at least one of his men unaccounted for." They mounted with difficulty, Victoria insisting that Finn ride Whisper while she took Thunder, as the gelding was steadier and would require less guidance if her attention was divided. They set off northward again, maintaining a cautious pace through the increasingly rugged terrain. As the sun began to set, Victoria spotted smoke rising in the distance, not the ominous billowing of a forest fire, but the controlled plumes of chimneys and cooking fires. "The military outpost. There it is," she said, relief evident in her voice. "We made it." Finn nodded, his face drawn with pain but his eyes alert. "Remember, Captain Miller is the man we need to speak to. If he's not there, ask for Lieutenant Dawson. No one else." Victoria frowned, confused by the specificity. "Why?" "Because Reeves has informants everywhere," Finn explained grimly. "Even, potentially, at the outpost. Miller and Dawson I trust with my life. The others, we can't be certain." The revelation was chilling. How far did Reeves' influence extend? How many officials had he corrupted or intimidated into serving his interests? As they approached the outpost, they were hailed by sentries at the perimeter. Finn identified himself, asking specifically for Captain Miller. The soldiers, young and nervous-looking, escorted them through the gates into a well-ordered compound of wooden buildings arranged around a central parade ground. Captain James Miller proved to be a burly man with a thick mustache and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at Finn's bloodied shoulder and Victoria's exhausted state and ushered them immediately into his private quarters. "Harrington, you old war dog," he greeted, though concern was evident beneath his gruff tone. "What kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" As a military doctor was summoned to tend to Finn's wound properly, Victoria explained their situation: the stagecoach attack, her identification of Reeves, the pursuit, and the firefight in the forest. Miller listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he turned to Finn, who was now sitting up on a cot, his shoulder professionally bandaged. "Reeves has been a thorn in our side for months," the captain confirmed. "Stagecoaches, payroll shipments, homesteaders, nothing's sacred to him. But we've never been able to catch him in the act or find a witness willing to testify." "You have one now," Finn said, nodding toward Victoria. "If she's willing." Victoria straightened her spine, determination overriding her fatigue. "I am. I want to see him brought to justice for what he did to those innocent people." Miller studied her with newfound respect. "It won't be easy, Miss Calloway. Reeves has friends in unexpected places. Until we can arrange a proper trial, you'll need protection." "She can stay here," Finn suggested, but Miller shook his head. "The outpost isn't secure enough," he said. "Too many people coming and going. I can spare 2 men to escort you both to Fort Whipple. The territorial governor is there this month. He can arrange for Miss Calloway's testimony to be properly documented and protected." "Both of us?" Finn questioned. Miller raised an eyebrow. "You think Reeves will let either of you live after what happened today? You're in this together now, like it or not." The captain's words, though pragmatic, sent a quiet thrill through Victoria. Together. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, the idea of facing it with Finn by her side gave her a strange comfort. That night, they were given separate but adjoining quarters in the officers' section of the outpost. After a hot meal, and a chance to bathe and change into borrowed clothing, Victoria, in a simple cotton dress provided by the captain's wife, Finn in clean army blues, they met in the small common area between their rooms. "How's the shoulder?" Victoria asked, noticing how Finn still held himself stiffly. "Better," he assured her. "The doctor did a fine job, said your field dressing probably saved me from a worse infection." Victoria smiled tiredly. "I'm glad I could return the favor after all you've done for me." Finn moved closer, his good hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." The simple declaration hung between them, honest and unadorned. Victoria leaned into his touch, her eyes meeting his. "Finn, when this is over, we shouldn't talk about when this is over yet," he interrupted gently. "Reeves is still out there. We have a long journey ahead to Fort Whipple." "I know," Victoria acknowledged, "but I need to say this. Whatever happens, I don't regret any of it. Meeting you, staying with you, it changed everything for me." Finn's expression softened. "For me too, more than you know." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Victoria rose on tiptoes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively, then deepened as months of solitude and days of tension gave way to something sweeter, more hopeful. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "We should rest. Dawn comes early and the trail to Fort Whipple is long." Victoria nodded, reluctantly stepping back. "Good night, Finn." "Good night, Victoria," he replied, his voice warm with promise. "Sleep well." The journey to Fort Whipple took 3 days of hard riding. Their small party consisting of Victoria, Finn, and 2 soldiers, Corporals Jenkins and Martinez, handpicked by Captain Miller for their reliability. They traveled vigilantly, taking turns keeping watch at night, always alert for signs of pursuit. On the afternoon of the third day, they crested a hill to see Fort Whipple spread out before them in the valley, below a substantial military installation that served as both Army headquarters for the territory and occasional residence for the territorial governor. "We made it," Victoria breathed, relief evident in her voice. Finn nodded, though his expression remained watchful. "Let's not celebrate until we're safely inside those walls." They were received at the fort with proper military efficiency, escorted immediately to meet with Colonel Harrison, the fort's commanding officer. He listened gravely to their account, then summoned an aide. "Arrange quarters for Miss Calloway and Mr. Harrington in the officers' section," he ordered. "And send word to Governor Safford that I need to speak with him immediately on a matter of territorial security." The next several days passed in a blur of activity. Victoria gave her formal testimony about the stagecoach attack to both military authorities and civilian officials, including the territorial governor himself, a serious man who promised that justice would be served. "We've been building a case against Reeves for months," Governor Safford explained during one meeting. "Your testimony may be the final piece we need to bring him to justice." News arrived that a military patrol, sent to the site of the forest firefight based on Finn and Victoria's directions, had found the body of one of Reeves' men, the one Finn had shot while protecting Victoria. Of Reeves himself, however, there was no sign beyond bloodstains suggesting he had indeed been wounded. "He's still out there," Finn said grimly when they received this report, "and he'll come for us if he gets the chance." "The fort is secure," Colonel Harrison assured them. "And we're organizing a territory-wide manhunt. Reeves' days are numbered." Despite the danger still lurking beyond the fort's walls, Victoria found herself settling into a strange new routine. She was given comfortable quarters, invited to dine with the officers' families, and treated with respect by all. Finn, too, was accorded honorary status, his reputation as a former Union medic and his friendship with several officers ensuring him a welcome place in the fort's society. In the evenings, they often walked together along the fort's walls, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. It was during one such walk, a week after their arrival, that Finn finally spoke of the future. "The colonel offered me a position," he said as they paused to gaze westward, "as a civilian scout and occasional medical assistant for patrols." Victoria's heart skipped. "Here at Fort Whipple," Finn nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "The pay is good, steady work. Safer than ranching alone on the frontier." "What about your land, your cabin?" "I could sell it," Finn said. "Or keep it as a place to go when I'm not needed here. The colonel says I'd have considerable freedom in my duties." Victoria absorbed this information, hope rising within her. "It sounds like a good opportunity." "It is," Finn agreed, finally turning to look at her. "But my decision depends on something else entirely." "What's that?" Victoria asked, though she hoped she knew the answer. Finn took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "On whether you'd consider staying in Arizona territory instead of continuing to San Francisco." Joy bloomed in Victoria's chest, but caution made her pause. "To do what? I have no position here, no family." "You could teach," Finn suggested. "Prescott is growing, they need educated people." "Or—" He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Or you could marry me." Victoria's breath caught. "Finn." "I know it's sudden," he continued hurriedly. "We've only known each other a short time, but sometimes life gives you a chance at happiness, and only a fool would let it slip away. I lost everything once. I don't want to lose you too." Victoria felt tears welling in her eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "Are you certain?" "I have nothing to offer, no dowry, no connections. You have everything I need," Finn interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "Courage, kindness, strength I never expected to find in anyone, let alone a city-bred schoolteacher who crawled to my door half dead." Victoria laughed through her tears, stepping closer to him. "That's quite a proposal, Mr. Harrington." "Is it working?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his steady gaze. In answer, Victoria rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her newfound certainty into the gesture. When they parted, she smiled up at him, her decision made. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to staying. Yes to teaching. Yes to marrying you." Finn's face transformed with joy, and he lifted her off her feet in an embrace that made her laugh despite the twinge in her healing leg. He set her down gently, aware of her injury, but kept his arms around her. "I promise you won't regret it," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "I know I won't," Victoria assured him. Their wedding took place 2 weeks later in the fort's small chapel. It was a simple affair, attended by the officers and their families who had come to know them during their stay. Victoria wore a dress of pale blue silk, a gift from the colonel's wife, with wildflowers in her hair. Finn, handsome and somewhat uncomfortable in borrowed formal attire, couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony. Governor Safford himself officiated, adding an official dignity to the proceedings that neither had expected. When it came time for the vows, Finn's voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face as he promised to love and protect her all the days of his life. Victoria, her heart full to bursting, made the same promises in return, knowing with bone-deep certainty that this unexpected turn in her journey was exactly where she was meant to be. After the ceremony, at the small reception held in the officers' mess, Colonel Harrison approached them with news. "We've had a report," he said, his expression serious despite the festive occasion. "Nathan Reeves was seen crossing into New Mexico territory 3 days ago." Finn's arm tightened around Victoria's waist. "You're certain?" "As certain as these things can be," the colonel replied. "Multiple witnesses. He was traveling alone, apparently wounded. The territorial authorities there have been alerted." Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her. "So it's over?" "Not entirely," Harrison cautioned. "Reeves is resourceful, but he's on the run now, not hunting you. And with the governor's protection and your testimony safely documented, his power in this territory is broken." The news cast a momentary shadow over their happiness, but as the reception continued, Victoria refused to let fear taint this day. She and Finn had faced death together and survived. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way later that night, in the small house at the edge of the fort that had been assigned to them as married quarters. Victoria and Finn stood together by the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Happy?" Finn asked, his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "Completely," Victoria assured him, leaning back against his chest. "Though I still can't quite believe how much has changed in such a short time." "Regrets?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in the question. Victoria turned in his arms to face him. "Not one. From the moment I crawled to your door, bloody and half dead, I've been exactly where I needed to be." Finn's eyes darkened with emotion. "I thought I was content in my solitude until you arrived. Now I can't imagine returning to that life." "You won't have to," Victoria promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "We have a new life to build, together." 2 years later, Victoria stood on the porch of their home on the outskirts of Prescott, watching as Finn approached on horseback, returning from his duties as a scout for the army. Their house was modest but comfortable, 4 rooms and a kitchen, with a small stable for their horses, and a garden that Victoria had coaxed into surprising abundance. despite the challenging climate. As Finn dismounted, a small figure darted past Victoria, running on sturdy legs toward his father with delighted cries. "Papa, Papa!" Finn swooped the child up into his arms, his face alight with joy. "There's my boy. Have you been helping your mama while I was away?" Thomas Harrington, not quite 18 months old, and the image of his father save for Victoria's auburn hair, babbled an enthusiastic response that only his parents could fully interpret. Victoria moved forward to greet her husband, accepting his kiss with a smile that hadn't dimmed in the years of their marriage. "Welcome home," she said, taking in the familiar sight of him still strong and handsome, though with a few more lines around his eyes, testament to years spent squinting into desert suns. "How was your journey?" "Uneventful," Finn replied, shifting Thomas to one arm so he could keep the other around Victoria as they walked back to the house. "The new settlers are settling in well. No sign of trouble." The territory had grown more civilized in the years since their marriage. Nathan Reeves had eventually been captured in New Mexico, tried, and hanged for his crimes. Other outlaws still plagued the frontier, but with increased military presence and growing settlements, the lawless era was slowly giving way to civilization. Victoria had found her place in this changing world. She taught at Prescott's first proper school 3 days a week, while caring for Thomas and their home the rest of the time. Finn divided his time between his duties as a scout and the small medical practice he had established in town, drawing on his experience as a field medic and the additional training he'd undertaken under the fort's surgeon. That evening, after Thomas was asleep in his small bed, Victoria and Finn sat together on their porch, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I had a letter from my aunt today," Victoria mentioned, her head resting on Finn's shoulder. "She still can't understand why I chose to remain in this savage wilderness instead of coming to San Francisco." Finn chuckled softly. "What did you tell her?" "That I found everything I ever wanted in the wilderness," Victoria replied, looking up at him with a smile. "Including a husband who carried me inside when I was injured and stayed awake all night to make sure I survived." "Best night of lost sleep in my life," Finn said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Victoria's hand moved to rest on her stomach, where the first subtle signs of their second child had begun to make themselves known. She hadn't told Finn yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news. "I have something to tell you," she began, a hint of mischief in her voice. Finn raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Not at all," Victoria assured him. Taking his hand, she placed it over her still flat abdomen. "We're going to need another bedroom, I think. In about 7 months." Finn's expression transformed from confusion to wonder in an instant. "Victoria." "Truly?" she nodded, laughing as he pulled her into an embrace that lifted her off her feet, much as he had done when she'd accepted his proposal years before. "Careful," she cautioned, though she wasn't truly concerned. Finn had never been anything but gentle with her, even in his most exuberant moments. He set her down carefully, his hands cradling her face as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever held. "I love you," he said simply. "More today than yesterday, and not as much as tomorrow." Victoria's heart swelled with happiness. From that desperate night when she had crawled to his door, bleeding and near death, to this peaceful evening on their own porch, their journey had been unexpected, sometimes dangerous, but always right. "And I love you," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him as the desert night settled around their home, their sanctuary, the place they had built together from the most unlikely of beginnings. In the years that followed, the Harrington family continued to grow and thrive in the Arizona territory. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Finn's mother, was joined 2 years later by another son, James. Their home expanded to accommodate the growing family, and their place in the community of Prescott strengthened with each passing season. Victoria's school grew from a single room with a handful of students to a proper building with multiple teachers, though she remained the headmistress, respected throughout the territory for her dedication to education on the frontier. Finn's medical practice flourished as well, his skills and compassion earning him the trust of townsfolk and ranchers alike. They never forgot how their story began with a wounded woman crawling to a stranger's door and the man who chose to help her. Each year, on the anniversary of that night, they would sit together after the children were asleep and remember the terror, the pain, the uncertainty, but also the courage and kindness that had brought them together. Their love, forged in those desperate hours and tempered through danger and joy alike, remained the foundation of everything they built. It was a love born of the frontier, resilient, practical, and true, a love that had saved them both in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful night when Victoria Calloway had crawled, bleeding and desperate, to Finn Harrington's door.